Welcome, everyone, to the Attuned Therapist podcast. My name is Rebecca Tatum, and I am your host. And I am extremely excited for our discussion today because it's going to be an introduction to an ongoing dialogue that we're going to have about ethics. And you may ask, why are we discussing ethics within a platform meant to talk about what it means to be attunement or to be attuned to ourselves? And I will tell you, the way that I conceptualize this is that to practice ethically is to practice attunement to ourselves. If you think about it as therapists, all we do and every decision we make is technically ethical in nature. Our ethics guide how we interact with our clients relationally, and that's what we do as a therapist. And so this idea of practicing attunement to ourselves and recognizing what are our needs and how do we go about honoring them, well, to practice ethically is a need relating to our profession, right? To our financial security, to our reputation, right? To practice ethically allows us to maintain our license, which in many states is what allows us to provide psychotherapy. So in short, it's important. And I would elaborate in saying that it's foundational to all that we do, okay? Ethics play a part in how we determine our business models and our policy practices, and the list just goes on, okay? What I've come to find is that it appears as though discussing ethics or brainstorming ethical decision-making, it seems to cause quite a lot of anxiety in us as therapists because of so much that could happen to us if we were to make a wrong decision and there were to be consequences, right? Like, no one wants to go in front of their board. No one wants to be a part of a client complaint, and none of us want to do harm, right? We want to make the right decision. But that anxiety piece causes a lot of us to just freeze and to not move forward in a course of action. And ethics don't have to be scary. They really don't. And I would argue that there's actually a lot of ethical areas that you are not nervous about, just perhaps certain areas that you are. Because again, all that you do as a therapist is relating to ethics in some way or another. So as you're engaging in this dialogue with me, if you're noticing any response in your body, I encourage you to take note of it and to be curious about what you may need as a result of that response, because ethics do not have to be scary. We can develop a relationship of understanding and knowledge for us as individuals that allows us to feel very creative and expansive and flexible and just like clear with ourselves and those that we work with around what it is that we do and don't do, what are the guidelines that are dictating that for us and informing us in the decisions that we make. And again, there's just a lot of clarity that comes from that. And having an understanding around ethics also allows us to be in a position of choice and power, not in comparison to the client, but with ourselves, and a sense of protecting ourselves. If we are not clear in our ethics, we are putting ourselves in a position to misstep or to make the wrong choice that could have negative consequences for us down the road. And so having the knowledge and the competency on the front end also allows for a certain level of like courage in ourselves, that we know what we're doing and that we can navigate these ethical dilemmas as they come up, rather than having this reactive, I don't know what to do now that this ethical dilemma is here. Okay, so for today, we're going to dive into what I'm going to reference as the pitfalls of seeking ethical guidance on social media. I think it's a very important topic for us to dive into, first and foremost. But as we have this ongoing dialogue and conversation in future episodes, my plan is to break down different ethical codes, just some common ethical dilemmas that come up for us as therapists, and having an open dialogue around what those codes mean for us, right? What might be the nuanced details of those experiences when they happen in the clinical setting, and just what are the available options to us for us as the therapist if we're in that position. Okay. So for today, again, I'm going to reference it as the pitfalls of seeking ethical guidance on social media. I'm sure you've all seen, if not posted, a question on social media that is ethical in nature. And sometimes it's a double whammy of ethics and legality. And truly, if you or you've seen someone else do this, post on social media with a question that's ethical in nature, there is a potential that that will go really well for you. You will get a robust amount of responses that have a lot of variety and guidance and courses of action suggested to you. They will be from reputable sources that are coming from a place of education and knowledge. And you will, within those posts or responses, identify a course of action that fits well for your unique situation, and you will apply that course of action and it will go well for you. I don't know that that ever actually happens, but there is room for that to be a possibility. So I am in no way saying that posting on social media is by nature wrong or will never work. However, what I am saying is that to post on social media for ethical guidance puts you in a very risky situation. Okay? So the potential pitfalls or risks that you take in seeking ethical guidance on social media is that you don't know who is responding to your post. But genuinely, you don't know them. They are not a trusted colleague. And you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know if they have a reputation within their community for practicing ethically. You don't know their level of education, their credential, their years of experience. You just don't know, what position they're coming from in that response. And for those of us who are the responders to those posts, we also don't know the poster and all of their background and their detail. So there's risk actually on both ends taking place. But for you as the person posting, what you also don't know is the nuanced detail of the responder's suggestion to you. So what we oftentimes see, I post a question on social media and I get this response of, this is what I did and it worked for me. That's beautiful. One, you don't know if that's real. You just don't. And you don't know all the details about it. Two, it's not your situation. And so just because a course of action worked for someone else does not mean that it's going to work for yours. And that's something to be very intentional about when you're considering how you're going to respond to an ethical problem, right? Is the nuanced details of your situation. Another area that is a potential pitfall is that the feedback you're getting may be unsupported, unsubstantiated by any type of research, or it may not be backed by a professional organization. It might just be someone posting a suggestion that sounds good to them, sounds good to you, based off the extremely limited information from your post. So again, it might sound good on social media, but in practice, it may have very limited applicability, or it may have potential consequence to the client or to you that is harmful. Another aspect of social media that you all are well aware of is that, you are playing a risky game of HIPAA. How much information do you share so that you can get answers that are helpful versus, how protective are you being of your client's confidential information? It's hard to know the answer to that because you could post something feeling as though it's confidential enough, and little do you know that there's someone who can see your post that knows who you're talking about. So there's that component to this, but as a result of wanting to maintain confidentiality for our clients, we are typically posting very limited amount of information. Well, when we do that, we're not providing the nuanced detail of our ethical problem. So then the responses that we're getting are typically quite black and white in nature, just kind of yeah, you can do that, no, you can't, when ethical dilemmas are rarely black and white. And when they are, we aren't typically reaching out to social media to get them answered. we know what we can and can't do in those situations. It's typically the nuanced gray middle area that we're seeking support for. In order to get the accurate support that you need in that situation, you would want to be able to provide as much detail as necessary, which we're just not able to do on social media. So there's just limitations across the board with seeking ethical guidance in this platform. And then in kind of summary, a question to be curious about is, when we post questions on social media that are ethically based, do we ever truly get what we were looking for in the first place? Right? Do we ever walk away from that feeling really sturdy and confident and very clear of, this is what I'm going to do? I'm not so sure that social media and the answers we get within it, although they are well intended, I don't know that they actually ever truly meet the need at hand. Okay. An example that I see often, this seems to be one that comes up in many different groups and platforms on social media, is this question around like dual/prior relationships with clients, right? So I know this client through like an extended relational thing, right? I used to work with their husband, or, it's in a small community, so I know this person who knows the potential client, whatever it might be. And questions around like, can I treat them or not? The reason why this gets posted as much as it does, I believe, is because our ethical codes are not black and white about it, because a lot does matter. We aren't automatically unable to work with someone just because we knew them somehow previously in our life. There are exclusions to that. If we had a prior romantic or sexual relationship, or if they're a family member, we're not meant to treat them. But that's not really what those posts are about either, right? So there's oftentimes this question around, how do I decide if I can work with someone if I knew them somehow in a previous way? And then the other area that gets asked often is, I'm working with this client, I've worked with them for a long time, and they've invited me to their wedding. Can I go? Right? So extending those therapeutic boundaries within our relationship. Again, our ethical codes aren't black and white about it. And I should clarify at this point, my specific codes are the American Counseling Association. And I transparently do not have all the other codes memorized. I don't even have mine memorized, but I just don't have the same familiarity with those other codes. So if in anything I say today or future dialogue does not align with your codes, just know that's why, and follow your codes. But anyhow, the idea around previous relationships or extending counseling boundaries is a question mark for many, as it should be. It's something for us to stop and ponder. And the ACA codes ask if we are contemplating working with someone who we had a previous relationship with or extending those counseling boundaries. The ACA codes guide us to first pause and document beforehand, if feasible, and specifically documenting the rationale for working with that individual or extending that boundary, identifying the benefits of doing so, and then being very clear about what are the anticipated consequences to the client, to anyone immediately around them involved, what potentially could take place with the situation at hand. Okay, so again, we are invited to document beforehand. Posting on social media is never going to count as your documentation. It's just not. And so if you are not, in addition to posting, engaging in some sort of documentation practice within the client record or within your own reporting system, you are missing potentially the most important aspect of ethical decision making, and that is the documentation process. Because, as you know, if we don't document it, one could say it never happened. Okay. Posting on social media and that being all that you do is never going to feel sufficient enough to a professional organization, to a licensing board, or to a court of law. And so just know that as you, or if you continue to use social media in that way, it is not sufficient for your ethical decision-making process. And again, it's quite risky. So in using that example, of people posting around, I want to work with this client, but I knew them XYZ, or I want to go to this special event for this current client and this is why. Again, that post, it's speaking to a legitimate need. But the feedback that person's going to get is not unique to their specific situation and could potentially get that poster in a whole lot of trouble, right? And so what should we do instead, right? Like, here I am talking about the issue at hand, but like, what is it that we should do? Well, first and foremost, we should learn, okay? It is your laws governing where you practice that really guide what you do. So if this is applicable to any law or statute or rule, that is important to first identify for yourself. Laws trump ethics, and that indicates what's legal and what's not. Also, dive into your ethical codes. Get a sense of what they tell you to do and tell you to not do. That way, as you go into future ethical dilemmas, you have a general sense of what you can and can't do. However, there's ethical codes that invite us to engage in an ethical decision-making model. They aren't yes and no, right? Just like the extending boundaries and prior relationship codes that I referenced earlier. That then invites us to reference our professional organization, our licensing boards, potentially an attorney if it's legal in nature, to see, what is our profession and our board telling us to do as it relates to this problem. Find solace in knowing that you're not the first person to encounter this ethical dilemma. Someone else has encountered a similar situation. And I'm not talking about like fellow people on social media. I'm talking about like within your professional organization or within your local area of practicing. There's some level of literature or information available to you via the internet to learn more about what are the different courses of action and what are the recommendations outlined for you and how to navigate this dilemma. Another area that I encourage you to consider for yourself is developing trusted relationships with peers or colleagues who you can seek direct consultation with rather than posting on social media. That way, you know that person's education, professional organization, reputation, everything, and you vetted them in that way. They meet your standards in that sense. Or at least have someone available to provide you consultation formally, someone available to you that you, again, trust and can schedule with if you need help navigating a dilemma. No matter if you do this alone or with a trusted colleague or through paid consultation, I highly encourage you to engage in an ethical decision-making model and to have an understanding around how you document engaging in that model, right? So a lot of the steps prior were relating to learning and seeking guidance, where that's part of it. But the second part of it is actually engaging in a model of how you go about making your decision and then documenting it. Essentially, all of that effort and all of that work didn't happen if you don't document it. And having an understanding around when you do or don't document it in the client's chart. If you don't, where then do you document it? If you are employed at an agency or an organization, they will have resources available to you and they will have procedures in place for you to follow as well as it relates to this. But whether you're in private practice or within an organization, this is your individual ethical responsibility to do. Our ethics invite us to engage in a decision-making model, to seek consultation, and to document. And nowhere in that does social media fit that bill, right? So that's a pitfall as well, is that it's just not sufficient for us, okay? So I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope that it gave you a sense of like, okay, why not? And as a result of why not, what do I do instead? You are welcome to check out some additional resources that I have available on my website. It is attunedcd.com, or you can Google Attuned Consultation and Development. I have within there a course that outlines an ethical decision-making process. And then I'm also available for that consultation if you need guidance in response to an ethical problem. But outside of that, I really enjoyed this dialogue with you. I would love to hear your feedback or your comments relating to it. Please reach out to me via in the comments, or you're welcome to email me at info@attunedcd.com. I look forward to talking with you next time. Take care.